If you wore the uniform any time before the Gulf War, there's a VA benefit sitting out there that most veterans and their families have never heard of, and it has nothing to do with a service-connected disability rating. Today, I'm going to walk you through three things. First, what this benefit actually is and who Uncle Sam really intended it for. Second, the biggest myth floating around about who qualifies, because the before 1990 headline you've probably seen isn't quite telling the whole story. And third, the exact form, the exact paperwork trail, and the mistakes that get otherwise eligible veterans denied every single day. Stick with me, because the part about who else in your household might qualify, even if you never filed a single VA claim in your life, comes near the end, and it's the part people usually wish they'd known years earlier. This is the VA pension program, sometimes called the Veterans Pension or Improved Pension, and inside it there's an add-on called Aid and Attendance, along with a related benefit called Housebound. This is not VA disability compensation. Disability compensation is for injuries or illnesses connected to your service. Pension is different. Pension is a needs-based benefit for wartime veterans who are now older or disabled and living on a limited income, regardless of whether their health issues have anything to do with their time in service. That distinction matters because a lot of veterans assume they don't qualify because their knees or their heart or their memory issues weren't caused by the military. With pension, that's not the test at all. VA pension eligibility isn't based on some blanket cutoff date. It's based on whether you served at least 90 days of active duty, with at least one day falling during a period Congress has officially recognized as wartime. Those periods include World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam era, and the Gulf War era, which officially began August 2, 1990. So if you served only during peacetime stretches, say the late 1970s or most of the 1980s, with no overlap into a recognized war period, the plain before 1990 framing you've seen in some videos or Facebook posts can actually be misleading. What matters is whether your service dates touch one of those defined windows, not simply whether your calendar happens to read before or after 1990. I'd rather you know that now than get your hopes up and then feel blindsided later. Think about a Vietnam-era veteran now in their 70s or 80s. Think about a Korean War veteran, though that population is smaller each year. And here's a detail a lot of people miss. Your years of active duty don't all have to fall inside the war period. If you enlisted in, say, 1972 and your service extended into the mid-1970s, that overlaps the Vietnam era, and that alone can satisfy the wartime service requirement, even if most of your career happened afterward. This is exactly why so many veterans who separated in the late 1970s or 1980s still qualify. Their service simply touched that window at some point. The maximum annual pension rate, what the VA calls the MAPR, changes periodically and depends on your household situation, whether you're single or married, whether you have a dependent, and critically, whether you need aid and attendance or housebound assistance layered on top of the base pension. Aid and attendance is for veterans who need help with daily activities like bathing, dressing, or managing medication, or who are in a nursing facility. Housebound is for veterans substantially confined to their home due to a permanent disability. These add-ons can meaningfully increase what a low-income wartime veteran receives every month, which is where those attention-grabbing dollar figures you've seen in headlines come from. But your actual amount depends entirely on your income, your unreimbursed medical expenses, and your net worth. So please treat any specific number you see online as an example, not a guarantee, until the VA calculates your individual case. Let's pause here for a second because I want to mention something before we go further. If this kind of plain English breakdown of veterans' benefits is useful to you, hitting like helps this channel reach more veterans and their spouses who are missing out on this exact information. And subscribing means you won't miss the follow-up videos where we walk through real application scenarios step by step. Okay, let's keep going, because the paperwork side is where most people trip up. The form most people are chasing is VA Form 21-527EZ, the application for pension. If you also need the aid and attendance or housebound benefit added, there's a companion form, VA Form 21-2680, which your physician fills out to document your need for assistance. Both are free, straight from the VA, no purchase, no subscription, no third-party fee required to obtain them. That's an important point because there are companies out there that charge veterans to help, fill out forms that cost nothing, and are available directly through va.gov or through an accredited veteran service officer at no charge whatsoever. Veterans apply for pension, get denied, and assume they're simply not eligible when the real issue was net worth. The VA looks at your assets combined with your income using something called the net worth limit, and this figure is adjusted periodically. If your countable assets, savings, investments, a second property exceed that threshold, you can be denied even if your monthly income is modest. But here's the piece almost nobody mentions. Unreimbursed medical expenses, including a good portion of assisted living or in-home care costs, can be deducted from your countable income. That deduction alone pushes a lot of veterans who initially look over the limit back into an eligible range. If you were denied years ago without anyone walking you through that medical expense deduction, it may genuinely be worth taking another look. People wait until a crisis to apply. If you're already in a nursing home and paying privately, every month you delay filing is a month of benefit you can't get back once approved, because pension generally isn't retroactive to before your application date in the way some people assume. If you think you might eventually need this, starting the paperwork conversation now, even before you need aid and attendance specifically, puts you in a much stronger position later. Some veterans assume that anything other than an honorable discharge disqualifies them entirely. That's not automatically true. Other than dishonorable discharges are often reviewed case by case, and many veterans with general or other than honorable characterizations have still qualified for VA benefits depending on the specific circumstances of their service and discharge. Don't rule yourself out based on assumption alone. An accredited veterans service officer, and I mean someone through a recognized organization like the VFW, American Legion, DAV, or your state's Department of Veterans Affairs, can review your DD-214 and give you a real answer at no cost. This benefit isn't limited to living veterans. There's a related benefit called Survivor's Pension, sometimes still referred to informally by its older name for surviving spouses of wartime veterans who haven't remarried, and it follows a similar structure, including its own aid and attendance add-on. So if you're a widow or widower of a veteran who served during one of those recognized wartime periods, and your late spouse's service met the length and character requirements, you may be sitting on eligibility you never knew existed simply because the veteran themselves never filed a claim while they were alive. I've talked to families where a widow in her 80s, living on a fixed income and paying out of pocket for home health aides, had no idea this door was even open to her, because everyone assumed VA benefits died with the veteran. One more overlooked detail before we wrap up. Pension and aid and attendance can sometimes be layered with other support you're already receiving, like Social Security, without automatically disqualifying you, because VA pension has its own separate income test rather than piggybacking directly off Social Security's rules. That said, your Social Security income does count toward the VA's income calculation, so it's not that the two are invisible to each other. It's that VA pension uses its own formula, medical deductions and all, rather than simply mirroring another agency's cutoff. This is exactly the kind of detail that trips people up when they try to self-assess eligibility using rules from a completely different program. The headline claim that simply serving before 1990 unlocks this benefit isn't precisely accurate. What actually matters is whether your active duty service even briefly overlapped a recognized wartime period, combined with your current income, net worth, and whether you need help with daily living or are housebound. The forms you need, 2-1-527EZ for the pension itself and 2-1-268. If you're pursuing aid and attendance, are completely free, and so is expert help through an accredited veterans service officer. Surviving spouses of qualifying wartime veterans may also be eligible, even decades after the veteran's service ended. If there's one single action to take today, it's this. Don't try to guess your eligibility from a headline, including this one. Contact an accredited veterans service officer or start directly at va.gov and ask them to walk through your specific service dates, your income, and your medical expenses. It costs nothing. It takes one conversation, and it's the only way to know for certain whether this door is open for you or for a surviving spouse in your life. You served when your country asked you to. Taking 20 minutes now to find out what you've earned is more than reasonable, and I'm glad you spent this time here today learning exactly where to start.